there are many women whose names will probably never be known because women were marginalized even in the civil rights movement.
When we think of the civil rights movement, we often hear names like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and John Lewis. But what about the women who were just as essential?
Dr. Giddings mentioned a lot of them, like Fannie Lou Hamer. I mean, Fannie Lou was a very strong woman, did many things. There was just you know, you think about Rosa Parks. She named Rosa Parks. But Ella Baker, she's mentioned her. Those are the ones we kind of know.
Welcome back to Black Ball, where we showcase the excellence of Black culture and uncover the untold stories of Black history. Today, we're highlighting the role of Black women in the civil rights movement. And we'll do it without even mentioning the greatness of Rosa Parks. Before we get started, make sure you hit the like, share, and subscribe button. We can only make this type of content with your support.
Travel 26 miles, the county courthouse in Indianola, to try to register to become first-class citizens.
The foundation of the civil rights movement was built long before the 1960s, and Black women were at the heart of this early activism. Take Ida B. Wells, aka the anti-lynch crusader. Born into slavery, then forced to raise her young siblings after the yellow fever took out her family, including her parents, Miss Wells fought tirelessly for the rights of Black people. First, as a journalist, she fought tirelessly against lynching in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Her investigative reporting exposed the horrors of this violence to the world and set the stage for later movements to combat racial injustice. Ms. Wells's published works include Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases, and The Red Record, both of which brought her national attention. Later, she stood 10 toes down for Black women as she led their fight for equal rights, not only among the men, but often against white women. And let's not forget, but just in case you did, Ms. Wells is credited as one of the original founders of the NAACP. Then there's Septima Clark. Some people referred to her as the grandmother or queen mother of the civil rights movement, but Martin Luther King Jr. referred to her as the mother of the movement. Ms. Clark was born a rebel, the daughter of a former slave and a free Haitian. Septima Poinsett Clark saw the harsh discrepancies in education based on race early on. In 1904, when she was just 6, she was thrust into a class of 100 other 6-year-olds and one teacher. In order to actually learn something, she was sent to the home of a Black elderly woman who taught her how to read and write. In her hometown of Charleston, South Carolina, they didn't have a high school for Black children, but somehow, she continued to find ways to educate herself. Because she couldn't afford to attend college, Mrs. Clark's odyssey into education led her to become a teacher. It was her time as a teacher that radicalized her. Ms. Clark recalls as a principal, she was getting paid $35 a week to oversee 132 students, and only had one teacher. Meanwhile, the white teachers just across the street only had 3 students, and the white teacher was paid $85 a week. Not the white principal, but just the white teacher was getting paid more than double. It wasn't just the pay, but the disregard for Black boys and girls by overcrowding the classrooms that led her down a lifelong path of empowering students and teachers. Ms. Clark is most famous for pioneering citizenship schools. These schools were developed to increase literacy among Black children and adults, while also empowering the Black communities they served. Her courses taught literacy as well as citizenship rights and encouraged her students to exercise those rights, including advocating for voting. While some leaders stood in the spotlight, others worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring the movement's success. Insert Ella Baker. Ms. Baker worked shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Dr. King, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Thurgood Marshall, and along the way was a mentor to young advocates like Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture. She despised elitism and believed that the power of any movement should go from the bottom to the top instead of focusing on the top to the bottom. That is why Ms. Baker's first efforts were with the Young Negroes Cooperative League. This initiative sought to build Black economics through a system of networks. She continued to work on the grassroots level as a teacher and also helped young Black Americans find jobs. Her path later led her to work with the NAACP, where she maintained her intention of strengthening the rank and file. It was Ms. Baker's role as the director of branches, making her the highest-ranked woman within the NAACP, by the way, that led her to really connect with young Black folk throughout the country. During her time with the NAACP, she spoke at churches, slept in the homes, and ate at the tables of young men and women who were down with the cause. She would then go back to the NAACP and advocate that they democratize and allow for more young blood. to which she was met with resistance. She saw that young black people were willing to take on these causes with their minds as well as their bodies, and that inspired her. So in 1960, on the heels of sit-ins across the country, Ms. Baker put together a meeting for the leaders of those sit-ins to assess their struggles and explore the possibilities for future actions. It was here that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was formed. SNCC became the most active organization in the deeply oppressed Mississippi Delta. It was more open to women than any other prominent civil rights organization, and Ms. Baker is forever known as the godmother of SNCC. One of those young leaders Ella Baker mentored was Diane Nash. As a student leader, Diane played a key role in organizing sit-ins, including the first successful campaign to integrate a lunch counter in Nashville, Tennessee. Ms. Nash was disciplined in the art of nonviolent protests. She led the Nashville sit-ins that lasted for 6 months. For 6 months, she led a group that would venture to segregated stores and restaurants, doing nothing more than speaking with the manager when they were refused service. Ms. Nash led as her and her comrades were faced with physical harassment and assaults, but they were trained to be non-reactionary and to always have love and compassion for the harassers. Diane Nash's fearlessness was evident when she faced threats head-on, knowing the dangers, yet refusing to back down. This type of protest became popular during the Civil Rights Movement, eventually spreading to 69 cities across the country. And this woman needs her own segment, and we will get there at a later time. But what about Miss Fannie Lou Hamer? Talk about a woman who has gone up against so many obstacles. Born and raised in Mississippi, Fannie Lou Hamer turned a rough upbringing into a tough leader in the Civil Rights Movement. She and her family were sharecroppers. On the daily, Miss Hamer picked up to 300 pounds of cotton as a teenager, while still excelling in spelling bees and winning poetry contests. Oh, and yeah, she also had polio at the time. Later on, after getting married, Miss Hamer underwent a procedure to remove a tumor from her uterus. However, unknowingly, the white doctor performed a hysterectomy on her, permanently preventing her from having children. Come to find out, forced sterilization was a devious tool used against black people down in Mississippi as a form of population control. This was commonly referred to as the Mississippi appendectomy. But all of this molded Miss Hamer into a unique force during the Civil Rights Movement. Fannie Lou Hamer was a staunch advocate for voting rights. She put her body on the line multiple times to exercise her rights and to help others cast their ballots. In 1962, Miss Hamer took 3 literacy tests just to be able to vote, and then when she finally did go to exercise her right as an American, her boss fired her the next day. Then to make matters worse, she was a target of a drive-by shooting. 15 bullets came her way. Luckily, none hit her. The following year, as she was traveling through Mississippi after returning from a voter's workshop, she and the members she was with were arrested and brutally beat by police officers. Miss Hamer was beaten so bad, she sustained permanent kidney and eye damage. Her response? I guess if I'd had any sense, I'd have been a little scared. But what was the point of being scared? The only thing they could do was kill me. And it kind of seemed like they'd been trying to do that a little bit at a time since I could remember. But Miss Hamer continued to fight. In 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer helped co-found the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in an effort to prevent the regional all-white Democratic Party's attempts to stifle African American voices. Miss Hamer was able to speak at the 1964 Democratic Convention. Her televised speech was broadcasted to the nation and her nationwide notoriety. All of this is on account we want to register to become first-class citizens, and if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off the hooks because our lives are threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Fannie Lou Hamer. In 1972, Hamer was elected as a National Party delegate. Still following? Share this video with 5 powerful women in your life. Historically, Black Americans have thrived in the arts, especially music. Music was a great instrument used during the Civil Rights Movement. Black women used their creativity to inspire and empower the movement. Goddesses created the soundtrack and the fight songs of the time. Nina Simone directly addressed the murder of Medgar Evans and the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church with her song Mississippi Goddamn. Her song invigorated the movement, with her stating that the song for her was like throwing 10 bullets back at them. A song directly shot at the violence of racism hadn't caused that much ruckus since Billie Holiday's 1939 classic, Strange Fruit. Nina Simone would release her own cover of Strange Fruit in 1965, a year after she released Mississippi Goddamn. Not only did they use music, but actresses like Ruby Dee, used her platform to amplify the message of the movement. Ruby Dee was a prominent award-winning actress who worked alongside the likes of Sidney Poitier, Louis Gossett Jr., and Paul Newman. She also worked frequently with her husband, Ossie Davis. They were both well-known civil rights activists. Ruby Dee was a member of SNCC, the Congress of Racial Equality, and a member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the NAACP. The married couple were also friends with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Ruby Dee even emceed at the famous 1963 March on Washington. Of course, black women were also at the front lines of direct action. Okay, we lied. We can't talk about the women of the civil rights movement without mentioning maybe the most famous woman of the movement. Rosa Parks is often remembered for sparking the Montgomery bus boycott, but did you know she was already an activist in the NAACP? Rosa was part of a larger network of women fighting for justice. But also, an even lesser known fact is that Mrs. Parks wasn't even the first black woman to refuse to give up her seat. That title belongs to Claudette Colvin. At the time, Ms. Colvin was only 15 years old when she refused to give up her seat. The story goes, in Montgomery, Alabama, during the Jim Crow South when everything was segregated, even though black and white people could share public transportation like buses, they were still separated by race, white people in the front and black people to the back. But in the case that the white section was full, if more white people came on the bus, black people were supposed to give up their seat. But Ms. Colvin said no. As a matter of fact, Claudette Colvin, as well as a black pregnant woman by the name of Ruth Hamilton, both said no to giving up their seats. And this happened 9 months before the Rosa Parks incident. The legacy of these women lives on today. Their courage, strategy, and sacrifices paved the way for future movements, including Black Lives Matter. They proved that change doesn't always come from the spotlight. It often comes from those working tirelessly behind the scenes. Now it's our responsibility to make sure their names and contributions are never forgotten. Who are some other black women in history you think deserve more recognition? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and donate to our channel. Together, let's keep these stories alive.